Well, it's finally happened. It has come to pass that a Canik is finally on the channel, and it only took a few years. I'm Chris with Jerry'sOutdoorSports.com, and this is the Canik MC9. While Canik has been known for their full-size pistols like the Rival, the SFT, and the SFX, the MC9s have also been incredibly popular, and for good reason. Canik is known for their overall reliability and their phenomenal striker-fire triggers. Back in the early 2010s when Canik came out, trigger snobs still looked down on striker-fire triggers, but the Caniks quickly gained a reputation for having some of the best striker-fire triggers out there. Over the years, Canik has managed to improve these triggers, and the MC9 wasn't left out of that. The trigger isn't going to be what's responsible for misses. Mine breaks at about 4.5 pounds, and while it does have a longer trigger stroke, it's not terrible. The first 6 millimeters or so take you up to a wall that you really have to pay attention to focus on. Then you have another 4 millimeters of travel before you get to the final wall. And once it breaks, you have about 2 millimeters of over travel. Then on the reset, you get those 2 millimeters of travel forward, and then you're right back on the reset. Honestly, when I was working with the MC9, the trigger felt lighter, down at about 3.5 to 3 3/4, and I really do attribute that to the smoothness of the trigger stroke. The trigger helps the MC9 punch well above its weight. On the range, I was able to run the MC9 pretty fast and keep groups smaller than I was expecting. I'm not going to say that it shoots like a larger pistol, and that's a trope that I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed with. The muzzle does want to flip a little bit more than a full-size pistol, and the MC9 does have a higher bore axis, which some people will make a lot about, but I think it has a marginal effect, especially if you have good grip fundamentals. That said, I did opt to run the MC9 with the finger extension on the base pad rather than the base pad that didn't have it, because otherwise my pinky just kind of wants to flop around there and not really help with much. I absolutely can do work without my pinky on there, but this just gets me a little bit more security as I'm running it. The sights are blacked out in the rear and a white dot up front, which tends to be my preference with sight systems. The MC9 is also cut for an RMSC footprint optic, which, of course, at this point I suggest. One thing that does need to be said about the Caniks is that something about their geometry makes them really hate CCI Blazer ammo. There are some companies that will do aftermarket fixes to change this, but I would just say if you're going to get a Canik, then don't stock up on CCI Blazer. Aside from that, everything else ran just fine in it. I ran Norma, Federal, and various hollow points through it and had no issues with reliability at all. One thing I will say about the MC9 is that this thing can pinch just about anybody's hand on a reload. Because of a squared off portion that sits behind the magazine, reloading with it will absolutely grab the meat of your palm and press it up there and give it a nice little pinch. That being said, I hope you're not doing too many emergency reloads with a concealed carry minded pistol. One thing I will say about the MC9 is that it shoots incredibly well. It absolutely goes blow for blow with the big names like the Springfield Hellcat, the Smith and Wesson Shield, and the Sig P365. And one nice thing about all Canics is that they come with a holster packed in with them. I've found the holsters to be a little hit or miss on quality, but at least you're going to have something until you find your favorite holster variety. Canik really has earned a name for themselves in the industry, and rightfully so. Some of the big names out there shoot them and take home a lot of competition wins with them, like Niels Johnson, who is honestly one of the nicest people I've ever met. I'll be honest, I kind of disregarded the Canik line because I just perceived it as a copy of the P99 from Walther, and yeah, it is, but there's also a lot of improvements and substance here that I was wrong to disregard. Anyway, I'm Chris with Jerry'sOutdoorSports.com, and I'll see you next time.